Our purpose here is to talk to young people and find out what engages them and find out what issues are critical and important to them. To that end, what we're going to do is have a Socratic style seminar. What that is a discussion where the discussion leader throws out a question. And the first question is what's called a round robin. So everybody in the group answers as lengthily or as briefly as they want with this question. The second question gets thrown out, and anybody who wants to answer it can. And we hope that we'll have multiple answers. It's not a matter of somebody answers a question and then we're done with it. It's anybody who feels like they have something to say about this question can do so. They can piggyback off somebody else's answer. They can agree with somebody and expand upon why. They can disagree with somebody. They can take it in a direction and run with it. The sign of a truly successful Socratic seminar is when you hear the voices of the people involved in the discussion and you don't hear my voice very much at all. I'm essentially there to facilitate, to throw out the questions and let people answer at length. When I sense the discussion winds down, that's when I throw out my next question. And to wrap up, we'll have another round robin that, again, everybody can answer as deeply or as briefly as they wish. So for that, I would like to introduce myself and then go around and have everybody give a brief sentence of introduction for themselves, their name, where they're located, and anything they would want us to know about them. So I'll begin. I'm Kim Biondi. I've been a teacher in Cabarrus County for over 20 years, and I am the moderator of this discussion.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jared Johnson. I'm a former student of Biondi, and I currently go to the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I'm currently studying political science and communications, and I'm happy to see you all here.
My name is Nicholas Santiago. I'm located in Concord, North Carolina. I am a proud college dropout, and I'm very grateful to be here. I just love being a part of experiences like this and getting to meet new people.
Hi, I'm Ayana Willoughby, and I am the social media strategist for the Keisha for Cabarrus County campaign, and I attend Appalachian State University, where I study journalism with a minor in new media and digital cultures. And I'm really excited to share my opinions with y'all and listen to everything that y'all have to say and maybe learn some more stuff.
Well, thank you, Ms. Sandage and Ms. Biondi, for having me. My name is Devin Mullins. I'm a graduate of Concord High School, and I was an intern with the Cabarrus County School Board while I was there in high school. I currently go to Appalachian State University, majoring in international comparative politics and sustainable development. So these issues are right up my alley. I'm looking forward to having a conversation.
Hi, my name is Rebecca O'Reilly. I go to UNCG. I'm a super senior. I study music with a minor in women and gender studies. And I've been in Cabarrus County almost my entire life. I am a product of Cabarrus County schools, and I'm super excited to give some feedback to that area.
My first question is going to be the first question that is on our list. And this is for everybody. Jared, we'll start with you and then just proceed in the order that we proceeded. How personally involved are you in politics and political movement? And how does your level of involvement compare to that of your friends and your peers?
I would say that over the past 2 years, I would probably say, I couldn't even give you a definitive year. I would say maybe my ninth grade year back in 2014. That was when I became slightly more interested in politics. I learned about the political parties, the political process, all of these things. And the main thing that sparked that was right around the shooting of Mike Brown. I that was the first time I really started to recognize that there were issues within my own community. And so that's when I started to get into the pipelines of prison system, a few other things. And then I would say that in comparison to my peers, I've encouraged them to recognize the importance of certain issues that may not necessarily affect them, but in some sort of way, it becomes a human rights issue, and it becomes a duty for everyone to deal with those issues and make some sort of change.
I am very new to politics. The main reason I started getting into them is because I'd say last year I started investing money, trying to better myself for later in life. And when I started learning about money, politics slowly came in. I started learning, well, what does this, what follows this action. And I just slowly got into like watching debates on YouTube and just watching debates, hear people voice out their opinions, voice out facts. I thought that was just really cool. Then I started implementing it into my day-to-day life of just, if I don't agree with someone, have a conversation. Then I started just day by day finding myself looking at politics. I've recently got involved with using my voice or just my time to give a message, such as going like protests. Love looking at things on social media and YouTube, like I just said. And that's pretty much it.
I would say that I didn't really get started in politics until, well, if I'm going to be transparent, really college. I didn't really understand the local and national like systems, and all I remember is Obama being president, and that's really all I remember from like elementary school, middle school, and high school. And then when I got to college and I decided I wanted to be a journalism major, a big part of the news is politics. A big part of what we talk about and what we report on is what the president is doing, even at local levels, what they're doing as well. So that's when I personally found it to be beneficial to me to look into the different levels of government and their importance, rather than just like surface level. There's 3 branches of government and this is what the president does, this is what Senate does. I would say college is when I really started to dig deeper. And a lot of organizations that I've come in contact with on my college campus have really made sure that people are educated about the different levels of government and how to interact with each of them. And I'm really appreciative of that.
So for my answer, I would say I've been interested in politics as a general concept since the 2008 election. I remember I was 8 years old. My parents had been hit pretty hard by the financial crash, and they were watching all the debates between McCain and Obama. And I got super fascinated with it, even at such a young age. And since then, I've pretty much run with it, and I think about it a lot. As far as comparing myself to peers, I think that depends on what kind of politics we're talking about, because politics is so nuanced and complex. So if we're talking about party politics, I haven't really been involved in party politics that much. I am registered to one, but I don't particularly align myself with one, strictly speaking. But I vote. If we're talking about, analyzing politics and political systems and stuff, that's my major. I'm in school doing that. So I probably do that a lot more than other people. But, in terms of being involved in campaigns, I know young people who have been way more involved in electing actually specific people to positions than I have been. Whereas I probably think about politics as a system, or as, comparing 2 nations' political systems a lot more than somebody else would. So I think it's just really depends on where you actually narrow your focus. I will say, since the 2016 election, I've gotten a lot more involved in party politics, and I will be involved in electing some people, hopefully in 2020. So
I would say that growing up, I had a pretty large interest in politics. It was something that was discussed generally in my family. I have very politically active grandparents.
Devin, you mentioned a distinction between party politics and politics themselves. And that's an interesting distinction that I hadn't considered when I was making up these questions. So I'm going to throw out a question to the entire group. do you see yourself being more involved in party politics, or do you see yourself being more involved, more interested in politics that do not belong to a particular party, but rather you're more interested in systemic change?
I can answer if no one's ready yet. Sorry about that. I would think that I would be a bit more interested in more just the general idea of politics. I don't think that any sort of political issue belongs to a specific party. It all starts within the people and how it affects them. That's just to answer your other question as well. If it affects them negatively, then I think that that's where that spark comes from. If it tugs at the heart in some sort of way, if it pulls at those strings, that's when you start to actually see some sort of action take place, and that action could be, activism, going to protest, going to, to call their legislators, to mail them, talking on social media, creating memes, all those things. Those contribute to our political system, at least the current one that we have now. So yes, to answer your question, those things would be a bit more systemic because I wouldn't necessarily say that our political system has changed or anything like that. It's more of a systemic thing that has evolved over time. So you don't necessarily see those changes, but I would just say in hindsight, if that's the correct word to use, that's when you actually see those changes.
I agree with that to a large extent. I'm sorry, were you going, Rebecca?
You can go ahead and go.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that you can be involved in party politics, whether that be the two main parties or other parties as well, and be for systemic change or not be, or for being for the status quo or not. The distinction I was specifically making earlier was more about an observation I've seen among certain political science majors, just being one, and that is that a lot of those people are afraid to commit to any kind of policy issues or any kind of movements because our jobs, we're going into politics for a career, whether that be, somebody wanting to be hired on Capitol Hill as a legislative assistant or whatnot. Taking a certain position limits your job opportunities because the person may not want to hire you if your views don't align with them. And that can be a really tricky thing to navigate. And I'm, working through that, being a political science major who happens to have a lot of opinions as well. I think another important distinction on party politics as it relates to systemic change is that I think a lot of people assume that if you're an independent or if you don't necessarily align yourself completely with a Democrat or Republican, that you're also a moderate. And I think that's a false conception completely, because I'm not moderate at all. I consider myself strongly to the left, but and the Democrats tend to be, a party that I would more like to associate myself with, but there's times that I just don't, and that's why I don't associate with party politics so much. So there's a lot of nuance there, I think, but I hope that answered it kind of.
I think whenever we get into defining specific party politics, and how you were saying you're a political science major, right? And so you're looking for a job that will hire you whether or not you have specific views. For a good while of my college education that I've completed was actually music education. And that was something that I had to think about constantly, is as somebody who is genderqueer and a very I'm a different looking person. I know what I look like. I got green hair on one side and black hair on the other. And I understand that. And if I was to go into a classroom setting, there's a lot of principals and things people like that who wouldn't really necessarily want to hire me looking like that. So I understand that part of it. But I also, for me personally, and this goes into how I view party politics, is because I feel like we are so individualized right now. We are able to be individualized, and I think that's amazing. That having these two big pillars, and then ones that people don't, and other parties that people don't actually consider to be a party because of party politics and the two-party system, it doesn't give room for people to say, I want this but not that, without being told that then you're not really that. And with that binary system, there doesn't allow for much systemic change because you're constantly being blocked, I feel like, by somebody saying, well, that's not consistent with all of our views, all of our values. So I think in order to get some sort of systemic change, whether it be small or large, you kind of have to supersede the party that you're in and think about, like, is this a human rights issue? Is this just is this something that goes beyond, like, this person should have this or this person doesn't believe in this, so nobody should have it, kind of thing. You kind of have to look beyond the binary, I feel like, of those two systems.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't want to take up too much space. If somebody wants to talk, just interrupt me. But I think that is a really good view, and that's one of the reasons I wish that the American electoral process was different and allowed for more parties, or even a way to not strictly base yourself in a particular ideology or party, because they're not going to get it all right all the time. Human beings are messy and complicated, and parties that reflect human beings are as well. And I don't say that as to denigrate the party system, because I was involved with a party back in the 2016 election, and it was a remarkable apparatus for organizing people and bringing people together who share a common viewpoint. And I felt community in that, and I felt I made a lot of friends that way. But I totally, Rebecca has really spot on point with that. It just doesn't reflect everything, and it just can't, with how big and encompassing it tries to be. So.
Let me go back and revisit the second question that I put forward. And can everyone hear okay? We got this? All right. So the second question was, many of you spoke about an interest in politics that was sparked at a young age. The Mike Brown shooting, the 2008 crash of the economy, things like that. So do you think that it will take a similar spark to get other people, your peers, people your age? Will it take something like that to get them interested in politics? And Becca, you wanted to answer, I think, so.
Yeah, so part of the question that I got cut out on was that that I too experienced politics at a very young age. My aunt actually in 2008, in 2007-ish, whenever Barack Obama was doing his campaign tour, he was stopped in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and she decided to educate me about every single person that was running, and she was going to go see him, and so she decided to take me along. And it ended up being an experience that changed my life, got me completely hooked on just like this feeling that somebody had a plan. It was comforting. It wasn't, I'd only heard about politics being chaotic, I think, at that point, and it was the first time I found comfort in a political system. And then from there, I think I've had multiple moments that kind of sparked something growing up different, definitely sparked something because laws were being made that would change my life. And then going into speech and debate in high school, doing debates about current political topics and having to be well versed in them also helped spark that. And the thing that I think about people our age and even people younger than us in the generation slightly below us, I don't know what generation I fall in anymore. All of us as a community, I feel like, have just been living in like a barrel full of sparks. We, from the time that we were, or me personally, like 4 years old with 9/11, all the way to the crash of 2008, to all of these different wars we've been in and conflicts we've been in. I feel like we've had kind of like a cycle of things sparking people. I think it's one of the things that matters a lot to that is how much they actually get like educated or like real factual information about these things, and how much they understand, that the people understand how it affects them or people around them as well. So in terms of like things that have just started, like things like the Black Lives Matter movement, I've seen a lot of younger people coming out and saying, finally standing up and saying like, no, this is the thing I'm going to be involved with. This is what's important. And I think that's amazing. And I just feel like we've had so many of those opportunities that there's actually a lot more younger people starting to organize than we see, but they're not organizing in a way that can necessarily be helpful, because there isn't a lot of education on how to organize your own political atmosphere to be helpful to the party or the organization that you're trying to be helpful to, I believe.
Can I add something? I think that even though it may not seem helpful or it may not contribute to the greater good, I think that the younger generation even wanting to participate is a huge deal. And I will say from a journalism standpoint that the news has definitely changed from 9/11, the 2008 crash. Like 24-hour news cycles are very real. Fox News, CNN, ABC News, they're all very different, very real sources where people can gather their information and form their own opinions. And I think that social media in the last decade has done a really good job at presenting information to people, but where I think our generation struggles with, and I say millennials and Gen Z, we'll see something on Twitter and be like, oh my God, we need to cancel this person. We need to do this, that, and the third, but we don't actually go to Google and just look it up. Like, we don't really fact check things. And I think that's kind of our downfall as a generation. We see something on Twitter and we get outraged and we want to help and we want to do good. We want to make a petition. We want to create a GoFundMe, but we don't do very much fact checking. And I think that's where the term like fake news comes in, according to like politics and things like that, because it's because if the news is reporting something fake when the news is actually reporting what you say happened. So we're going off of what everyone else says, what everyone else feels, and then communicating that to the public as well. So I think that social media, the internet as a whole, 24-hour news cycles, all of that has gone into making our generation and then the generation under us very aware of everything and just wanting to participate.
I want to say I agree with what we just said about fact checking and making sure you look at what's going on. Because you never know, you could be completely arguing one point and you're just 100% wrong. It legit in our day and age takes 5 seconds to go on Google and say, did such and such happen? Who was involved? It's 5 seconds, and as one person, one of the people I like to watch and learn from, his name is Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro states, in an argument, debate, or anything, it's hard to argue against facts. No matter what your opinion is on something, it's hard to argue against the facts.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, kind of piggybacking on both of y'all, I think one of the things, Kim, you said in your question was, do we have to wait for something big to happen? And so while I agree with the premise of the question that yes, it does take usually something big for people to get involved in the political process, we don't have to wait for that because it happens every day. It's just that because of globalization and the internet and things like that, we see it a lot more now. So like a great example, I think that's already been brought up, is the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, Black men and women have been getting murdered by police or by other people for the color of their skin for centuries. I mean, since the start of the United States. But people know about it now. People are seeing it now. You know, every time it happens, well, not every time, unfortunately, but a lot of the times that it happens now, it's being put online, it's being shared, and that's really, really firing people up to make change on that issue. You know, people are having economic problems all the time, but it took the culmination of the 2008 financial crash for enough people to get really fired up about that, and that propelled, along with, you know, some of the race issues, that propelled Barack Obama to the presidency. So I think these things happen all the time. They happen every day, and that can spark any young person to get involved in the political process at any day. We don't have to wait for it. And I'll just add about kind of Ayanna and Nick touched on this a little bit too, the idea of like cancel culture and fact checking and stuff like that. I think this is a touchy topic because we have to acknowledge the fact that you know, minorities and women and LGBT Americans and a whole bunch of different groups have faced oppression for forever. I mean, like since the start of human history. So, the fact that maybe somebody gets called out a little too harshly here, or something happens to their career because they make a pretty big mistake here. I think we totally need to gauge how we react to those situations, but I also think that it's probably just an overcorrection more than it is like a really substantial issue that we need to like treat oppressors as like the victims now or anything like that. I think the pendulum has swung, and it'll level out eventually. And yes, we need to be fact checking, and yes, it's we shouldn't just cancel people right off the bat and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think it's actually a symptom of people aren't going to put up with this crap anymore. So
I think, just to piggyback off of that for a second, I think what's also happening isn't necessarily that like people are seeing it for the first time. I think part of it is that people are more uncomfortable by it now, because we've seen it happening. We can tell even in like comedy movies, the jokes that they make, it's commentary on what goes on. It's probably pretty honest commentary about what goes on because it's in that comedic format. So there's more comfortability making those kinds of statements. And if you like look at like about like how like this culture change or this culture shift has happened, it's because people are uncomfortable now, where it's not just like seeing it, we are uncomfortable and we will not, we can't have it in our spaces anymore. I think is a big propeller of it is as well. It is just the uncomfortability and saying like, I'm not gonna sit here and take it anymore.
Yeah, and Becca, to go off of that, I mean, one thing I would like to pretty much just say about that is, seeing those things, people react specific, in a certain way when they see these images on the internet or when they see these things in movies and any sort of media outlet. It doesn't necessarily have to be social media, just simple entertainment. And people, it seems that they have a hard time, differentiating between reality and what's on TV. And so when they react to those things, they put this into the real world. And so when someone sees someone wearing blackface or trying to act like a black person, quote unquote, that's when things start to get dangerous. And I think that's why cancel culture has become, or the idea of cancel culture has become so prevalent in our society today. So again, just to agree with Devin, I don't necessarily think it's the most, I guess, toxic thing in our culture today, but it's just a product of what we've been seeing for years.
If I could also touch on the fact-checking portion of it, I feel like while our generation does very much suffer from this like instant gratification of a news source, we see a thing, it validates our views or something like that, and then we're like, yep, that's the truth. Don't need to research anymore. We are the generation who has the most training on how to fact check stuff on the internet. I have sat through and enjoyed, Miss Biondi, so many lessons on how to get good sources. We should be able to do this almost with our eyes closed at this point. And I feel like we really need to start employing those methods that we've learned for the past 6 years into our daily lives when we're trying to find credible news sources. Like, does it end in a .com or a .org? That's your first one. Like that's one of your signs. You know what I mean? Being able to find like reputable news sources is a skill that I feel like has been given to us more frequently than to generations before. And I think we need to use that and also share that with people.
Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you. I think I've been in a few, I guess you could say, Facebook debates with people who bring up, this thing that they would call facts, and it would just be from a random Facebook page or simply a meme, and it would just simply not be true. I would say, hey, it takes less than 5 seconds to look this up on Google, and I wouldn't mean to be snarky about it, but that's really all that it takes. And that's what's, I would think that would be one of the most damaging things to our political system today. And I think that's one of the things that, that's one of the reasons why people still are, people still trust the Electoral College, because of this idea that we're not as Americans are not as informed. That was one of the main reasons why the Electoral College was created. But if we can implement critical thinking and fact checking into our society, as much as we have the younger generations into older generations, then I think that would be, it would create a much better argument for the abolishment of that, where one voice would actually equal one vote.
I'm so glad that you brought up Facebook and how do I put this? And the dependency on Facebook for older generations in learning information. I put that as nicely as I could. I don't know how to form it any better. But a lot of older generations look to Facebook for news on, or not necessarily news, just information and their friends' ideas about, the election, whether it's local or national, things like that. And I think that Facebook creates this bubble where you're around all of your friends that kind of believe in the same things that you do. So you're just seeing everything that you believe over and over again. And so there's no reason for anybody to fact check anything, because my friend just posted everything that I believe. So here we go. I know I'm right because my friend thinks it too. And so it just kind of solidifies that. And Facebook does that for older generations, but for us, it's Twitter. For us, it's Instagram. For the generation below us, it's TikTok. So I think that we all kind of just get caught up in this cycle. And especially since this is an election year, I use all of those social media sites. So I've kind of seen the difference of opinions throughout all of them. And there are a lot of political conversations on social media sites, but they all have different voices because they're all through different mediums. And I think if we can just remember that we, like, analytics for social media sites are geared towards putting us with people that think how we think. Right. And so if we can just get outside of that bubble and maybe look at a different news source or talk to a different political candidate or just get out of that bubble, then I think that that would be really beneficial for everyone.
At the same time, though, I would think that we could use that, I guess, bubble. We could use that in our favor and actually implement fact checking into our communities. So let's say that Barbara, for an example, she knows Ross up the street, and whatever he put on Facebook, it has to be true because he said it. If we can get Ross to actually fact check himself and not necessarily change his views, but be more well-rounded with the things that he's looking into, then you could have it would be more reputable. He would be more I don't know what's the word to say. I don't know the right word to say for this. You could better. I don't know the right word to say. He would be more credible. He would be a more credible source. Yeah, there we go. That's.
But at what point can you do that? Like, what point is that considered out of your place or overstepping your boundaries or out of line?
And that's the thing. I think that we have a bit more. I guess we have stereotypes against the older generation simply because we've seen these things take place over social media and especially Facebook. That's as soon as I mentioned Facebook, everyone agreed that there was a lot of misinformation going around. And so if we begin to have those conversations with people of that generation about, the dangers of misinformation and actually inform them on what fact checking is and how to get to these sources, whether if it's through a scholarly journal or through like EBSCO or something like that, or ProQuest, anything, I think that's where, when you kind of plant that seed, that's when you actually start to see that change. That's what I would assume. That's my whole theory on it.
Okay. I think some of the issue too with fact checking in general is that not everyone has access to EBSCOhost, ProQuest. For a lot of reputable or more reputable news sources, you have to have a subscription to view their articles. There is definitely a gap in between who, like, not saying that everyone can't have access to reputable information. It's just going to be harder for some folks. Right. Some folks genuinely are going to have to search more, learn more about it, about how the process of finding it, without things like EBSCOhost and ProQuest and things like that. I think we just need to also keep in mind that is, as a college student with a college email, that is a privilege that we have. Right. And that's why sometimes it's easier for us And as people with that sort of leg up, we should maybe use that and save the articles to send to people. Things like that. Share that information in a way that is accessible to people.
I totally agree with everything that's been said on the fact-checking topic. I think an additional layer on top of that is that not everything that defines political issues are built on facts. Sometimes it literally just is a difference of opinion. And also things that do get into the fact realm, like, a reporter reporting on any number of issues. Every reporter has biases, and it's impossible to get rid of your biases, and those will come out in certain respects, as much as they try to limit them. So, anybody can point to MSNBC and be like, oh, they have, one openly liberal reporter, so they're a liberal channel. Or anybody can point to Fox News and be like, they have X number of conservative reporters, so that everything they say is skewed. We have to, at a certain point,
I'm so sorry.
totally fine. At a certain point, I think we have to reject the adversarial nature of politics and start talking to each other again. Being okay with talking to somebody you disagree with, and it not being a personal issue or a that's not the right word at all, but it not being taken as anything more than a discussion of civil disagreement, I think is that additional layer that we have to get to. Otherwise, we will always be fighting about. We'll never have a level playing ground in which to communicate on.
Rebecca.
It's all about just keeping the conversation going. If you just leave silence is the opening door for violence, and you never know what can happen from there.
Rebecca, I know you mentioned something about how a lot of people just don't have access to good, reputable sources and things like that. So I just wanted to ask y'all if you thought that it was the same for information about government, whether it be local, state, or national. Like, do you think that some people just aren't informed about everything that's happening because they don't have the resources to become informed? Or do you think it's just pure ignorance and they're just...
I don't really believe that there's a lot in this day and age that can be pure ignorance unless it is willful ignorance. But there is, I think there is a bit of a gap in how things are portrayed. There are obviously like different levels of how engaged you were at the time when you were learning it. Not every 14-year-old really cares about the political system. But showing how it is important that they care, and including that into like curriculum, the importance of it, how, and getting that way, or using that education springboard to make it more accessible, definitely I think would help. But I also feel like people's individual surroundings can also hinder or help that situation. There are some families that you are not allowed to talk politics at the dinner table because it maybe will ruffle feathers. There are some families that in their systems, they are very involved and they talk about it with each other. There's definitely, there's different levels of how much the individual has been exposed to it in a way that is exciting or is important to them. I think that's why when I first learned about local elections and realized how important local elections were, because as a kid, you really only hear about the presidential race. But when you start realizing even how important like your register of deeds is, those kinds of positions in your local government determine so much more about your daily life than people realize, but not everyone's taught that information or is privy to that information.
I definitely agree that it's a curriculum. It starts at that level. Even in elementary school, of course, we learned about government and the levels of government, but I think that the curriculum doesn't really, we can learn a lot more than what we're currently learning. I still remember elementary school. I have younger siblings, they're in elementary school, and I know they don't really talk about it. So like you said, the register of deeds is incredibly important. County commissioner, incredibly important. Like these positions that we aren't really taught in school, these are the people that are in our communities making like day-to-day decisions that will directly impact our life, directly impact our families. So I think that maybe going back to school as young as like 5 in kindergarten, just learning about that and then continuing to learn about it so that we have a solid base of information. Because I had to learn all of this when I got to college, honestly, because I wasn't taught it in high school.
I think also maybe not just learning the importance, but learning how it's going to individually affect you, and that it can be fun, that it can be interesting, that you can find out about all these people who are doing things in your community and that you can meet them and your voice can be put out there. I think if that was a part of the curriculum of learning about government policies, is saying that, like, look, this needs to represent you so you can be represented and you can have all the opportunities you'd like to have too, would be very important. Because as I said earlier, we're an individualist society. We are here to be ourselves at this current moment. You know what I mean?
I would like to add into you guys' little thing going on there. I didn't necessarily recognize the importance of these, I would say, more local positions. These, mainly the people making the most decisions in our daily lives, the things that we see. And one thing is that, we have to recognize that that's where a lot of social movements in the beginning, any sort of political action takes place at the local level. Anything going up to the Supreme Court, just about anything that you see from there starts at the local level. And so if we don't communicate to each other those basic needs, or these wants that we want out of these people in our localities, if we don't communicate those needs to them, then I don't think that we don't necessarily get attention from them, and we don't get what we need.
I want to make sure everybody had a chance who wanted to speak on this had a chance to speak. Is there any final thoughts on this this last question? Well, wonderful. I was reading my list of questions, and you've touched on many of them, and I really thank you for that. I'm interested in this bubble that you referenced with social media that's present on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. Many of us do surround ourselves with people of like minds and like politics and similar beliefs. And it can be very difficult and painful to reach outside of your bubble and reach other people. Can any of you speak about times that you have made a concerted effort to reach somebody outside your bubble, how you did that, why you felt it was important to do so, any insight you could give on that?
I would love to start with this one. I like this. So just through my walk of life, I'm not afraid to say to anyone and voice my opinion that I'm now a conservative and I support Trump. I'm not afraid to say that. But just through my line of work, I work in restaurants, I coach, I meet with people, I listen to people every single day of their opinions, what hurts them every single day. Again, what I was just saying, if you just talk to someone, example, through walk of life, I've met a lot of people who affiliate with gangs. Talking to them, hearing them out of why they have to make their choices. If everyone can just understand that everyone comes from a different walk of life, everyone's raised different. It's not just all on social media. People do the same thing in real life. They'll surround their people. Okay, I don't like Trump. I'm not going to be friends with anyone who supports Trump. I have had people tell me to my face, you support him, we can't be friends. Everyone has the bubble thinking if they support this one person or this one topic, they only have this one view. There's 1,000 different stories for every topic and every opinion. And it's just go out there, find what you're passionate about, be confident in what you say, and have fun with just anything. Just enjoy the little things. If you're passionate about food, find out what makes food even better. Pictures, find out how you can take even better pictures. Just keep adding on and want to learn from other people who agree with you, people who don't agree with you. Just learn?
So, in response to the question itself, like a time that I have gone outside of like my bubble, I first like to say that I think part of the reason for the bubbles is oftentimes self-preservation. It's really hard to be around people constantly whose opinions are so different that they include marginalizing you. You know what I mean? That part of being in a bubble that has multiple different opinions can be quite taxing. Not saying that it's not worth it at times, but it can be an act of self-preservation to stay within your bubble. But there have definitely been times where I've been successful in reaching outside of my bubble. For instance, with my sister's father-in-law, he is the picture perfect, I'm going to read a meme on Facebook, that is now truth, it's in the Bible. Like, that's exactly how his brain thinks. And he shared something about the Pledge of Allegiance being just, it was a false meme about the Pledge of Allegiance. And I took the time to say, hey, here's an article that I found about this topic, and I would like to educate you about the actual origins and who wrote it and things of that such. And he wrote back to me and said, thank you so much for finding out this information. I have no clue how to do that. I am very interested in what you have had to say, and I'd like to sit down and talk to you about this in person, because it took me 20 minutes to write this paragraph on my little phone. And so, and I think in that way, if there's a lot about how your attitude is involved in how you're going to come across, obviously. How you speak, your body language is most of communication. Nonverbal communication is a lot of communication. And so if we can reach out of our bubbles in a way that's not already hostile, even though we may feel worked up and we may feel attacked because it's about something maybe that's about our own personal identity, there has to be a level of like, calm down, let's just talk about this until we get to a point where it's not helpful anymore. If there's just going to be bickering and nobody being helpful, there's no point in that. But I think if we can like make the effort to come at it and in a logical, calm, and just like talk to a human how you want to be talked to. Talk to each other how we want to be talked to. And I feel like that's the best way we can reach out of our bubble, because you can also always say, and I'm done here, and make your boundary and go away.
I think that with that, Becca, I think when we do have those conversations, if someone does become distressed because whatever political view that someone might have might be threatening to their entire identity, I think that we have to be careful to not invalidate those who do get upset with those things. We have to not tell people to calm down sometimes, because that is how they feel about those things, and that we have to look at that as a way to get their point across, because it affects this person so much. But I don't disagree with your point. Yeah.
I would just like to add that I love hearing outside ideas from my personal bubble, whether they're personal or political. I think that learning about different people's ideas will just help me become a well-rounded person, especially with the career field that I want to go in, as far as listening to everybody on all sides and just forming my own opinion, but trying not to let that sway my work. But like Devin said, every reporter has their own set of biases, so it's just how things work. But I do think that when somebody else's bubble, as a Black woman in America, it's very different. It's a very different experience, and not very many people get to live that experience. People can only assume how it feels, and each of you have your own different experiences, and that's beautiful. We all come together, and like people say, America is a mixing pot, a mixing bowl?
Melting pot.
Melting pot, yeah. America is definitely a melting pot. But what I think is important is that we all keep in mind that it's fine to have a difference of opinion and a difference of views, but when those views start to hurt or harm other people of different identities, that is where we should draw the line. I think that whether or not you're a Democrat or a Republican, that's fine. Most of those issues are like economic and financial anyway, but where someone's views start to harm someone or make them feel uncomfortable, that's personally where I draw the line. And like Rebecca was saying, self-preservation is really important. And you want to learn others' opinions and you want to talk to other people, but you also want to save your own mental health. And I know that talking to some people about their views, it's not beneficial to me, because all they can do is make assumptions on how I live my life as a Black woman in America. They can never talk about it from experience. So as far as conversing with people who have no experience in my shoes, I personally choose not to do that because I feel like it doesn't help me at all.
Yeah, I'll just say that I do have an example that answers the question, but I'll preface that with, I think as a white male in America, I have a certain privilege to go into other people's bubbles and not feel levels of discomfort that other people don't have. So I think it's a very individualized decision, and I hope that I never come across as pressuring somebody to branch out into other bubbles if they're not comfortable. And if I do, I welcome people to check me all the time with that. But for me personally, because I do have that privilege, I actually really do enjoy that. So my example I'll give is when I was an intern with the Cabarrus County School Board, most of the members on the school board are Republicans. And at the time, I very strongly identified as a Democrat. And I wanted to be involved in education, politics at a local level, so I went ahead and went with it. And eventually there was one Democrat elected to the board who I was thick as thieves with. But up until that point, it was mostly Republicans. And the 2016 election came around, which was the election that Democrat was elected. And so I was asked by some of the Republican board members if I wanted to go to fundraisers with them, or if I wanted to go to, local Republican Party speaking events. And I went and I listened. I heard some, things I agreed with, and I heard a bunch of things I didn't agree with. And there was a member of the North Carolina House of Representatives who had voted for HB2, which was a huge issue in that election. And I got the opportunity to speak to her at one of these events. And the chair of the Board of Education was standing right beside me, a Republican. He had invited me, and she was telling me, she was like, "Oh, it's so great that you're involved in local politics. I think local politics is everything. I think that all as many decisions as possible should be made at the local level." And I don't know what came over me, but I felt brave enough to just check her, and I said, "But you voted for HB2." I thought, if local politics means everything, why is the city of Charlotte, not able to make this own decision about how they want to operate their community? Instead, y'all pass HB2, and the North Carolina General Assembly, a bunch of Republican, cisgender white men, she was a woman, one of the few, told Charlotte how they were going to operate their community. She was silent. She didn't say anything. And I thought that was an incredible way. And the guy who had invited me, the chair of the board, he later told me that he changed his opinion on that issue. Not entirely because of me, but in part because of it. Because when you hear something like that, you hear what is that called? Something that doesn't make sense. An inconsistency with their worldview or their ideology. I'm sorry, what was it?
I was going to say hypocrisy.
Yes, hypocrisy. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. When you hear hypocrisy like that, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way. Maybe she didn't realize that she was hypocritical, but it's very telling. And the people who are observing that in that bubble start to trickle out of it. And I think it changed people's minds. And I think it's so useful. And I've had instances where that's happened to me before, where I've been brought out of my shell because somebody just planted a seed and allowed it to grow. And I think that's so useful, and we have to do.
I agree. That kind of discourse is very helpful in just forming a well-rounded opinion. And I think that's really important. It's fine to believe what you believe, but make sure you have facts to back that up. I think Nicholas said that in the beginning of the conversation, right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that the instance of somebody talking to someone outside of their bubble was a real life incident where the person was confronted face to face in real life. And it occurs to me that that's sometimes we don't see that on social media. You know, sometimes people will block someone or unfriend them or something like that. But social media is not going away, and in fact, it's going to play a bigger and bigger role in our political discourse. What are some of the things that you envision for social media? How would it be better to use social media to solve problems instead of picking sides?
If everyone could find a way to use social media in this platform, not such as feeling entitled on their opinion, because as of right now, we have a bunch of people who have a different viewpoint. We're all respecting each other. We're all listening. The sad truth is on social media, that never happens. It's people have their viewpoint. They don't reach out of their bubble like we're talking about right now. So in my honest opinion, social media, it's a really big blessing. It's a really big curse for a lot of people. It just depends on how you use it.
What I'd like to see more of in social media, and I've kind of witnessed a lot more of it now that I'm involved in a local campaign, but just the importance of local government. Like Devin was saying, people are trying to move decisions over to the local government, but people don't really know who they're electing. If it's an election year, people go in with one thing in mind, who they're going to elect for president. So everybody else is kind of just like, just, you know, doing the Christmas tree dots like you do on the Scantrons, just picking anybody. So I think on social media, it would be really nice to just grab more opinions of people who really know what they're talking about the government on the local level, as well as state, and of course, like national levels as well.
To piggyback off of that, I also agree. I think it would be so helpful if local politicians had active social media accounts. I think it's called like Ballotopedia or something. It's a website basically where the people who are going to be on your ballot have input their own information, or have their people input their information for them about their platforms and things like that. But like I had to do like Google searches to find that kind of stuff, and like Google their name and then find it in the thing, and it's a lot of work. But if I could just like go up to Facebook and see what your platform is, see what your, maybe if you've been in government for longer, maybe see what your past like bigger decisions have been, things of that sort, I think would be so helpful in terms of like what social media kind of does for us in terms of like showing us who's important in our area. But I also feel like if I could just have my way and have one thing on social media, it would be clear notifiers, or clear things that show that this is a satire article, or this is from somebody's blog, or this is not from a reputable, non-biased news source. So if this is like, I want to have more like readily accessible ways to tell that this isn't like official news reports. Because there's a lot of times where I'm scrolling and I see something and it takes me back, and I'm like, oh, I need to actually look this up before I actually do any kind of sharing of the sorts. I think that would be very, very helpful with social media as well.
Yeah, I know I took a U.S. Congress class over this past spring, and one of the first things that we learned was about Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and she won her district simply because she used social media. Her the incumbent of that district, he got pretty. The book said that he got pretty. What's the word? Comfortable, cocky. That's what usually happens with a lot of incumbents. And so the fact that she used her her social media account and reached all of those younger voters who hadn't been registered, once she got to all of them, she ended up winning that district. And it's likely that it will happen again because she's able to reach those voters and she's able to motivate them to actually go out and do that. And I know with this election year, it'll be a bit harder to try to motivate people to go out due to the current situation with COVID-19. But if you're able to motivate people to become involved in that way and use social media with the best version of yourself and your best honest self, that's how you begin to gain the trust of certain voters that aren't usually very active.
I just want to bring up the fact that Keisha and like everybody on her campaign team have worked really hard to make sure that we are accessible through Google. If you want to Google anything about her, you can. I'm her social media strategist, so I know all about her social medias, her Facebook, her Instagram, her Tumblr, and it's really important. Yeah, she has Tumblr. Check her out. But it's really important to reaching these younger voters because, yes, there are a lot of people turning 18 or, just getting ready to vote, but there are also people who are in college or coming home or dropping out of college or just doing anything. So it's really important to make sure that you're accessible on social media. And I think a lot of people our age and even older using Facebook, we use Instagram, but are just looking for quick information on people that they're voting on. Nobody wants to do this whole Google history thing on every single person that they're voting on. So if you can just type in their name in the search bar and have them come up and you can see a clear list of everything that they believe in and what they've been doing for the community, what they've been doing for the nation as a whole. All right, boom, you got my vote. If you agree with it, that's really easy. And I think social media has made it really easy to find out more information about people, really understand how people are outside of like debates and strict, where they have to be on their P's and Q's. Like you can go to their social media and see like if they're a down to earth person or not. And I think that's what Keisha's social media do, in my opinion. And she just sent the link out for everyone. So check out her social medias.
I think if we also had politicians more available on social media, it would also discourage straight ticket voting, which can be a very real problem if you are purely just looking at what the political party is. And oftentimes, I mean, like you might have two of the same political party. Like if you can't figure out exactly who you're voting for, it's just going to lead to straight ticket voting, which could lead to you having somebody who you don't want to be elected because you just didn't know that you were electing like that specific platform. You know what I mean?
Devin, what would you say is the most impactful thing that social media can do for this upcoming election? Personally, I just want to know since you're poli-sci.
So I think when people say that the 2020 is the biggest election of our lifetimes, they're not just saying that because they want to get you out to vote or whatever. It actually is. So, we take president. A lot of people have very different views about who should be the president. That's one huge reason. Other thing is we have two like upcoming Supreme Court, nominees potentially within the next 4 years. That's going to be huge for deciding a whole bunch of social issues. But also 2020 is a census year, which means congressional districts, we're going to have the redrawing of districts and stuff like that. And those are done by state legislatures, which are partisan. It's not a nonpartisan group that draws those lines. So, social media can be a remarkable tool this election for informing people of that if there's any year that we take a look at state races, not who is your representative at the federal level from your state, who is your representative at your state legislative level. We should be spreading information about that, telling them that's why this election is so important. Because, especially in North Carolina, we have a racial gerrymandering problem and we have a political gerrymandering problem. And it's gone to the Supreme Court. It's gone to a whole bunch of courts at this point. And, we have a map that's being redrawn right now that looks a lot more fair. There's still some problems with it, but that's temporary. We still have, with the census, we're gaining an extra congressional district. And those lines are going to be redrawn again. And so, social media, that's not controversial to explain the facts that this is a census year that will lead to the redrawing of districts. That's just social media awareness that, that can be put out there and educate people and inform people. And that tells people that, you know, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian, or Socialist, or whatever, that you should go vote because you care about who's drawing your districts, you know? So I think that's one way that I'm looking at social media this year.
That's a great point that I hadn't even thought about.
Thank you. I will add, since nobody else said anything, Ayana, you said a point earlier that I think was great about local races, and you mentioned college students. You know, I've not been super involved in Cabarrus County politics since leaving Cabarrus County. I'm, you know, a student at App State now. I've been super involved in Watauga County politics and Boone politics. So, you know, I honestly would have never even known that Miss Sandage was running, you know, in this race down here. But since learning about her campaign, I'm super fired up about it, and I'm interested to see, you know, what her ideas are and stuff like that. And it actually just made me look back at who our person running, I say our, but who the people that are running in this our state House district are. And I saw that actually our congressional race is actually super toss-up, that we have a Republican incumbent, a Democratic challenger, and it's actually going to be a really close race. And so I never would have even looked at that had we not had this online engagement that brought that to my attention. So I think, especially for college students, it's a great point.
It's really easy to just like move off to college and just kind of forget everything that your hometown did before.
Yep.
I know some people love to do that, and I'm from Charlotte, and I jumped at the opportunity to leave Mecklenburg County. It's very great, but like my parents still live here, so it's really important to make sure that just for them, I'm educated enough to have a conversation with them on what they expect for their community that they're living in now. And I guess since coronavirus that I'm living in now since March. So yeah, I think it's really important to just not forget things as college students once we leave.
Right. And I think that has had like an exponential impact. I think that adds up. So one of the things we looked at in one of my poli-sci classes last year was how a whole bunch of young people, especially college students, left the Midwest and the Rust Belt area, and how, you know, the people that stayed behind and the circumstances now, you know, who those people used to be Democratic voters actually switched their vote for Trump in the last election. And so, you know, something as simple as the phenomenon we're talking about here has real political consequences later on. And I respect you, Nick, you know, fully, but I personally did not see Trump's election as a good thing for me. So, you know, me observing that, you know, that's something I want to pay attention to, and you know, hopefully change.
There are also a lot of us who are sent off to college, and like for me, I'm the first like child in my family to go to college and be in college for as long as I have and things like that. And so in some ways, I feel like it's my responsibility to take some of this knowledge that I'm getting from college and bring it back to my family and my community and like the people I grew up with. That's one of the reasons this forum is so important to me, because I grew up in Cabarrus County. Cabarrus County is what made me, I think what made me part of who I am, like our school system, the amazing teachers I had. I've had a really great experience in Cabarrus County, despite there being some like educational flaws. And of course there's always room to grow. But I think we're kind of sometimes seen as like the people who bring the education back to our families and things like that, because we've gotten the privilege to go off to school or go off into the community that's not the one that you grew up in. You know, I grew up in a town that has like 2 stoplights, and now I'm in Greensboro, where I can walk to like 4 different stores, and that's cool.
That's exactly what I was about to add. Like, not even just going off to college, but just getting different scenery than our parents got. Like, I know my mom has lived in like Mecklenburg County, Union County area for a really, really long time. So she's just kind of used to the flow of things and the way things work. But when we go out, and I went to like Watauga County, and I saw like, oh, they're doing this. Their county commissioner is doing this. Like, let's talk about this. Let's talk about who we can vote for to make these types of things happen in our community. So I think that's really important too.
Many of you referenced the importance of local politics, which is very, pleasing and surprising, because many older people don't know the importance of local politics and wouldn't know one of their county commissioners by name if they heard it. So with that in mind, can each of you give a local issue that you feel particularly concerned with, whether it's something that falls under the purview of the city or county commissioners, the school board, anything like that?
I will say that one thing that I have learned more about is how much money goes into police funding in Mecklenburg County. And with the recent Black Lives Matter movement, with them painting, I don't know if y'all seen it, but uptown Charlotte, they've painted Black Lives Matter on the street. Like, a lot of performative actions have been made to show that Black people are welcome and appreciated in Mecklenburg County. But when you look at the back end of that, when you look at the politics of that and how they've been having meetings to reallocate money around the district, and these requests have been shot down. Like, police are still getting a bunch of funding, and teachers and schools are a lot of teachers and schools are underfunded in Charlotte, specifically Charlotte, because that's where I went to school, and I know what inner city schools look like, and I know what poverty looks like, and I know what having terrible school lunches and broke down textbooks. I know all of these things because I went to an inner city school. So to see them painting Black Lives Matter on the street, but all of these Black kids are in this school and we don't have proper textbooks, and our lunches is just like a carton of milk and a slab of meat on a patty. Like, I have really been looking into how we can get these local officials to see that it's more than painting a street. It's really learning about what you can do to help the community rather than just putting on performative acts.
Yeah, that's I really like that point, because that was actually the first thing I had thought of as well. I think that that's one of the biggest issues that we face right now. How do we reallocate funding to certain areas that that just might need that funding a bit more? I mean, we didn't really even start talking about this until the Black Lives Matter protests that started taking place about 50-something days ago. I think that now that that's part of the conversation, we can actually inform the public on the needs of the general community, on the housing crisis that's taking place in Charlotte. Anytime you go into Charlotte, there's a homeless person on literally every single corner. And I know that we're talking more specifically about Cabarrus County, but if we look into police budgets and budgets in general, we'll probably find a similar issue there. So if we can reallocate funding to fit the needs of the community as a whole, instead of basically militarizing and looking at crimes as they are, and looking at instead of looking at why these things are happening, that's when we can actually make some real change. So I guess that's really the main point of what I'm trying to say, is that if we keep looking at the what's, if we keep looking at somebody did this wrong, somebody did that wrong, and start looking at why this happened, why did our state government or our local government allow this to happen, then that's when we can actually make some real change. And that's actually starting to come up in a lot of local budgets all across the United States.
I think for me, one of the things that kind of stands out for a thing that I need wow, I am just tongue-tied, of something that is important to me in a more local area, is also the reallocation of funds in order to better support the community, as well as, really, the educational system needs more funding. Overall, through and through, needs more funding, because that is one of the biggest ways to end this prison pipeline that we have running. There needs to be some addressing in the equity of learning, not just the quality of learning, but in making sure that there's equity in it, as far as people getting a fair chance at getting good textbooks, transportation, healthy food, things like that within our school system. Even like I grew up in a very rural area, and our school was a very rural school. Like it was obvious that we didn't have all of the bells and whistles that some other bigger schools might have. And then also just incorporating that same like equity into the curriculums and standards that we have, making sure that we address the very whitewashed version of history that sometimes gets taught, or whether it's that specific way of teaching is in the curriculum or not, holding whoever is teaching accountable for how things are being displayed and taught, so that there is an accurate view of our history, so that we can learn from it. And I'm not just asking for someone to do more work. Like I said, if we could have the reallocation of funds so we could truly support our teachers, and so they can truly get all the needs that they have met, I'm sure we would be able to make more time and be less stressed out about hitting these standards, that we could then take time to bring in a more, just like a curriculum that is more suitable for what's really going on, and giving our students like the most fair chance at possible as to be like an adult in this world.
Piggybacking off of that, to answer the question, yeah, education is a really big one for me. My sister is a 6th grade English teacher, and my aunt is she works with NCAE, the North Carolina Association of Educators, which is the closest thing teachers in North Carolina get to a union, since they can't unionize. So curriculum, making it more nuanced and accurate. Raising teacher pay and supporting public education are 3 things on a local level I think are so important. And then outside of education, I specifically look from local candidates what their policies on affordable housing and gentrification are. And then also climate change. There are a number of cities across North Carolina, even being a lean red swing state that we are, that have already committed to 100% renewable energy, because they know that climate change is the biggest threat to human existence right now. And it's going to impact everybody. And, if the federal government won't act, then states have to. And if they won't, then cities have to. And really all of them should be, taking actions and steps in conjunction with each other. But I think Greensboro, I could be wrong, Rebecca, I think Greensboro committed to 100% renewable energy by 20 something.
I heard something very similar. I couldn't tell you a date, but
yeah. It's a certain date. UNC Asheville, the city of Asheville didn't do it, but the actual university has committed to net climate neutrality. That's something at a local level that I feel like people aren't talking about yet. Some of the more progressive cities are, but we need to here in Concord, or in as a county level as well. So.
I would like to add, because I just learned this fact the other day, that Cabarrus County spends 42% of its budget on education. So I think that Cabarrus County is one of the few that prioritizes the education of its students. Rebecca, you went to school in Cabarrus County, right?
Just about all years but 7th grade. Yeah.
And you said that your school experience was very rural. So I think that maybe the money that they spend, like the amount of money that they spend, is very helpful, but maybe just rearranging it just a little bit so that students get a better experience out of it would be nice.
Oh, definitely. I mean, my elementary school was rural, my middle school was like this middle ground, and then high school was actually in Concord right off of 49. So like I did get to see, I mean, it's not like Central Cabarrus is very like urban by any standards at all, but like it was different than going to school at Bethel and Midland. So I definitely got to see how the funds got allocated differently in different areas of just like the county. I think, that was very important about where we were and how they were going to be used.
one of the things I remember about interning with the Board of Education was that because all county taxes or county revenue goes through the Board of Commissioners, that the people on that board had an enormous amount of influence over how the school board was actually allocating funds to education. And the problem I saw with it was, when you're running for a county commissioner seat, you may be asked questions about education, but there's a whole host of other issues you're asked about. The Board of Education is a much more focused system. It's quite literally focused on that county school system. So I would like to see a whole lot less strings attached to the county and more power and independence given to those school board members, because they're the ones actually going to be asked questions during an election about what they're going to, the decisions they're going to make, and then we can hold them more accountable, after they have one, because we have them on record saying things. Whereas when you have somebody on the Board of Commissioners who's only asked one question about education in an election, but then has all the power over how much budget, what the budget looks like for the school board members, there's a huge problem there. We don't know their full views on that, and they have more power for the process than they probably should.
We're just about at the end of our time. What I'd like to do is do a final round robin, and this time we'll work backwards. We'll start with Becca, and then work backwards through Jared. And what I'd like to ask is just briefly, what are your thoughts about the upcoming election with regard to the engagement of your peers? Not yourself, you are obviously all very, very engaged, but your peer group. Would you say that they are very likely to be voting, less likely to be voting? What is their level of engagement? And that will be our final round robin. Becca, we'll start with you.
So I feel like in my peer group, I am very, annoying is not the right word, I am persistent in letting people know when they need to vote, when they need to be registered by, things like that. So in my peer group, like in my immediate peer group, kind of like in my bubble, as we were talking about earlier, I'm pretty sure almost everyone in that group is going to vote. Whether or not they are sure about their vote at this point, I couldn't answer to, because there's a lot of information that we're trying to receive and process every day in order to make a decision that we feel is very important. But I also feel like there is so much uncertainty about how this election is going to go that there are definitely some people in my peer group that are kind of waiting, I feel like almost like procrastinating making the decision or really researching into some of the nuances of things, because it's overwhelming a little bit right now with everything going on. It can be overwhelming to like really get into the nitty-gritty of it, and I feel like with more time and with a little bit of pressure, there definitely will be more active participation in the process. Just will come a little bit later in the process. I think it'll be like a late stage hit.
Is it me next?
Yeah.
I think for me, or for my community or my circles, I think the question is not if they will vote, it's who they'll vote for. I think from the top down on the ballot, I think there is a level of ambivalence or apathy or even just frustration with not being excited about our options. And I think that I think for a lot of communities, they haven't made up their mind. I think a lot of people know who they don't want to vote for and haven't but they're not seeing a really strong alternative. I know that's the case for me, and I know that's the case for a lot of other people as well. So I think most of the people I talk to are definitely going to vote, and there's some races that are clear on who they're going to vote for, but there's others that are a lot more complicated, and for a whole bunch of different issues, and I think that'll be really interesting to see. And I think it's up to people who are politically engaged to make the case for candidate X or issue Y about why people should engage with those.
Just piggybacking off of you, Devin, I think that everybody, not just young people, I think we're ready. I think that the last 4 years that we've had have really shown us what we value as a nation and as communities. And I think that we've taken that information and we're ready to apply that to the 2020 election. There have been a lot of trolls, Kanye running for president, Lil Uzi Vert running for president. There's been a lot of things said on social media about this election, but we all can come to the mutual understanding that on the local level, state level, and national level, this is a very important, very impactful election year. And I think everybody's ready, whether or not they just turned 18, whether or not they're 65, everybody's ready.
Devin, did you have a chance to weigh in?
Yeah, I went already. I think it's Nick next.
Oh, Nick, sorry.
Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you for Miss Keisha for inviting me to be a part of this, and thank each and every single one of you for just being here, voicing your opinion, and saying something that you guys are passionate about. Like I said in the very beginning, I am still very new to politics. There were some stuff that I said I didn't agree with, and I wanted to discuss back with it, but because I did not know the facts on it, I let everyone voice their opinion, and I really do feel like I learned a lot, especially Devin. I appreciate you for telling me about the importance of 2020. I really do appreciate that. I'm definitely going to do some more research into that. And for the rest of this year, come up in my peers. The way I like to describe a lot of my peers, a lot of them are a bunch of e-thugs. They're going to stick to social media. They're not going to do anything outside of social media. They're going to be in their bubble like we talked about earlier. They're going to stick to that. I know I'm planning on voting, and I'm going to vote. I'm definitely looking forward to looking on to the state level because you guys really opened my eyes, and I appreciate that again. But I want people to understand. I want to try to voice out to other people that their opinions, their views do matter. And doesn't matter if you are 18, 19, you're 25, and you never vote. Since we were talking about rappers, I would not vote for Lil Uzi. Offset, the rapper, just voted for the first time in his life, and he is 30-something. It doesn't matter if you're 18, 40. Just take the time, sit down, weigh out your options. A lot of people don't like who is running, or don't really like the options they have to fall back if they don't vote for that person. It takes 5 minutes to sit down, hop on Google, and learn a thing. Education is power. Just takes very little time just to educate yourself and to be smarter than you were than yesterday. Thank you guys very much for this time.
Jer?
Okay. For my peers, most of my friends, I keep saying friends, but the people around me in my bubble and all, I think that they have definitely had a hard time choosing who they would want to be president, or yeah, I mean that's the main thing. They've definitely had a hard time, mainly because of I guess the spread of information and misinformation. Looking at the past, looking at legislation made by specific individuals, all of these things, they've taken account into all these things, and I think that's a great thing. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what I feel like. I think that they're definitely going to vote, but for them, it's going to be a hard pill for them to swallow at this point. But in the political playground, you make specific sacrifices because you want something later on. And I mean, that's what the political process is. It's not just, okay, you pass this and then this happens. No, it's, it takes time. It's going to take years. And that's just about everything that we see here, even on the local level. That's pretty much my main thing. I would say my peers, my whole entire circle, they're full of leftists. I wouldn't say directly, I wouldn't say Democrats, but most of them were at one point, but have become more, I guess you could say, radical, if that's a safe word to use, mainly because of the information that they've received over the past few years and the way that they've educated themselves over the past few years. And I think that, even if they don't vote, that sends a message, it's a message for them, I guess, to the whole entire political system that we have, that we just simply need to do better. Maybe a two-party system isn't the best thing for us. Maybe we should expand that because, again, like we were talking about earlier, there's so many more ideas out there that we need to include into the conversation on the national level. So that, I think that's how I can most simply put in.
I want to thank everybody for their time. Becca and Jared, it was great seeing you again. Ayana, Devin, and Nicholas, it was wonderful having a chance to talk to you. Keisha, thank you for this opportunity. And thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Had a great time.
Yes, it was really wonderful to talk and to listen.